I hope that young people who read my books, they come to define themselves, and they come to say that I'm going to speak my mind and speak my truth and speak my heart, because right now we're dealing with a society that's full of adults who don't speak their minds, who don't speak their hearts, and just let things happen. And as long as we are silent about things, nothing's going to change. So if nothing else, I learned from my mom to, one, know that you have a voice, and two, use it to make some noise.
My name is Jennifer Boyce. I'm this year's chair of Santa Monica Reads here at the Santa Monica Public Library. Santa Monica Reads is a citywide reads program that we do annually. This is the library's 17th year doing the program, and it's one of the longest running programs of its kind in the country, so we're very proud of that. And the idea of Santa Monica Reads is it's a citywide reads program, so we encourage everyone to read the same book and read and discuss the same book and attend related programs.
The Hate U Give on some levels represented a lot of interest from the community selection leading up until today, because all of them actually dealt with issues that are of great concern to us, ranging from immigration, community engagement, class and race, profiling. This particular title wove all of those things together and talked a lot about some of the isms that actually are part of the framework of what we're dealing with as a community, but also dealing with implicit bias and historical racism and a lot of the things that are evident in our political and societal experiences today. But in such a way, because it's fiction, but also based on real life events, that really triggered, I think, a lot of emotion, but a lot of activism and hope that there are something as human beings that we can do about some of those issues that seem to be very troubling in our times today.
Star Carter lives in two different worlds, in her low-income Black neighborhood and her elite, mostly white, private high school. And honestly, she feels out of place in both situations. She feels like she's kind of split into two different versions of herself, and neither one is necessarily 100% true Star. And we open on a party in her neighborhood, and she meets up with her friend Khalil, who she grew up with when gunshots go off. Immediately, everyone just decides, all right, hey, this has gotten out of control, we don't want to be part of it, and Khalil offers to give Star a ride home away from the party. While they're driving home and they're catching up and they're talking about everything, Khalil actually starts talking to Star about music. He mentions Tupac, and he mentions the idea of thug life. And that's where the title of this book comes from. He explains that Tupac's thug life stands for the hate you give little infants fucks everybody. So they're driving back from the party and they get pulled over by a white officer who's only ever identified by his badge number 115. Khalil is pulled out of the car, and at one point he leans back in to check on Star, and in that moment the white officer panics and fatally wounds Khalil. Meanwhile, Star is still in the car and she watches all of this happen. She watches her childhood friend pass away in front of her. The whole book is Star dealing with the ramifications of not only knowing someone that this happened to, but being part of this incredibly traumatic, stressful situation. And throughout the book, it's kind of involves her taking choices and making choices about what she should do. Should she be silent and protect herself and protect her privacy? At first she decides, and her family decides, that it's better to be quiet and to protect Star's privacy, and they fight very hard for it. But as time goes on, the media starts focusing not on the events that happened that night, but rather on Khalil and his character. They start painting him as a gang member and a drug dealer, and this starts to upset Star because she knew his character, she knew what kind of person he was, and again, she knew what he was doing. He was leaning in to ask her if she was okay with everything that was happening when he died. And they paint this picture that he was reaching for a gun, but there was a hairbrush. So Star is growing increasingly frustrated with the process for getting justice for Khalil, and she begins to realize that it's not going to happen. During all this, there's a lot going on in her school life and her home life to kind of help build her to this decision, but she decides that she can't stay silent anymore, that she has to speak up for her friend and for her community and for her neighborhood. She realizes the power that she has, and so she decides to speak up. And in doing so, there's a grand jury trial, which ultimately the white officer is acquitted, which leads to the climax of the book, which is a bunch of riots in Star's neighborhood. And so Star and her friends are going around, and intermixed with all these riots, there is actually a protest organized by a political activist. And Star, who had tried to speak up and had been unsuccessful, joins this political rally. She jumps up on a car, she's given a megaphone by the political activist, and she starts leading people like in a very grassroots kind of way, and it's cathartic and it's empowering.
This book, The Hate U Give, has been just a phenomenal read, but also on a huger scale, everybody loves this book and is buying it, and it's so important, all the issues that it discusses, but she manages to stay humble, even in this day and age that she has so many fans and so many followers. She just stays humble, and I really admire her for that.
Well, I think the aspects that inspired me was like Star, because Star was like, she's very quiet, but like at the end, she started expressing herself and how she really felt. But like, I think it's inspiring because like she came from two different environments. She came from an environment that wasn't like the greatest environment, and then she went to school in a suburban area. So it's just like her going through like the emotions that she went through and not being able to explain to her friends like, my friend just got shot by a cop, and she couldn't explain that to her white friends because she felt that they wouldn't understand. So I think that was inspiring, that like she couldn't voice her opinion at first, but then like by the end she got up and she just let it be said and spoke what her truth was.
Well, I read the book first, and then I like went through it so fast, like I just couldn't put it down. And I think it's like such an important book that we have for so many reasons. One, because I think it does a really great job of telling a really important story in a way that's digestible for not just people who are like really into this genre, right, and who really care about learning about social justice and like what's going on in the world, but also just like it's written for young adults. And I think it's like a really digestible book for a huge segment of the population, which I think is important when you're trying to get a message like this to as many people as possible.
I think what I most love about The Hate U Give is the message behind it.
Yes.
The fact that people like stand up to what you believe. Don't just forget about it. If you believe in something, go for it.
Yes, don't just stand by and let others do the work.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't expect this book to get the wide readership that it has. I was totally stunned by it. I'm still stunned by it. But my hope was more so than anything that the real stars out there and the real Khalils and the real Sevens and the real Sakanis would pick up this book, and the real Kenyas would see themselves reflected authentically. And so that was my biggest concern, and that was my biggest fear. So knowing that they see themselves great is the best part, but also then realizing that I made assumptions about people before I ever really gave them a chance. It really made me check myself. I didn't think white kids would read my book. I really didn't. And they've shown me that I have to stop making assumptions about them because the world does it enough. So they've proven me wrong, and I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful that they are proving to publishing too that any kid can read any book and connect with it in some way. And even if they don't necessarily see themselves, they can still enjoy it. And that's what The Hate You Give has proven.
I always find it inspiring when you read both coming of age stories and people who find their voice in a circumstance that they're wavering. They're not really certain if they're going to find their voice, and there's a lot going on and a chaos brewing around them. And she found her Uncle Carlos. She found, the lawyer somewhat, but she found her mother who believed in her, and she found that she could be inspired, and not just because she was the poster child for the lawyer that she was going to make this case, but she could speak from her own truth. And I think that's a very powerful message, not just to young women, but to young people and other people, adults also, who are trying to make their way in a world that has a lot raining down on them.
So, like Star, interestingly enough, Star, there's a lot of Angie in Star, and Angie uses her voice for social justice by writing books. And I'm all about doing the same, using storytelling as a way to bring awareness to things that other people are dealing with and to stimulate empathy in other people. And I think that Star's story does that, and the way that Star eventually does decide to come forward and use her voice and put herself out there in a way that she was nervous about doing initially. That's one of the most powerful ways that you can use your voice, is to tell your story, tell your truth.
One of the more inspiring things about this particular novel was that we so often see young adult novels that are taking place in these settings and these worlds that aren't very much like our own, very futuristic, dystopian. But I like the fact that in this particular novel, we see a story taking place in the world that we currently live in. And I think it gives you a way to explore that world, and perhaps from a perspective that you hadn't seen before, unless you've grown up in this setting.
I think in reading the book, I've found the strength of the characters really inspiring. They've been going through some really heavy times, times that are parallel to what's happening now. Like, that could be a story that you just plop in and it's reality. Like, it's a fiction book, but very much reality. So to be able to witness the strength of the characters, particularly in that one chapter where Star is being interviewed by police officers or interrogated, and she reminds herself, like, speak eloquently, essentially like talk white, whatever that means, and she's there with her mom, and she has these moments of just like, how dare you ask me that, how insulting, and she has these moments of like, oh, I need to respond accordingly, right? But the strength in that, to kind of sit in it and be grilled, and still be able to like bring life to Khalil in the situation where he clearly was not valued at all. The strength and resiliency of the characters has been really moving, even amidst such tragedy and loss.
I'm totally amazed. I've gotten fan letters from 8-year-old little black boys who live in Chicago. And then I got a fan letter from a 90-year-old white woman who lives in Iowa, who keeps copies of my book with her so that she can pass them out to young people. To know that both of them loved it, it gives me so much hope. To know that both of them were inspired by it in some way gives me hope. It shows me that there are so many people in this country who want to change things. There are so many people in this country who are willing to step out of their comfort zones. There are so many people in this country who want to do something, and who are willing to listen, and are even willing to listen to perspectives beyond their own. And if nothing else, that definitely fills me with so much hope that, the kids, not only will the kids be all right, but maybe some of these adults will too.
I would recommend this read to anyone, really, because code switching is not something that people know too much about. It's just something that most people do who have to operate between two different worlds. And I think the more you read, the more you have to empathize. And I believe that reading fiction, more than watching the movie, you have a deeper sense of the character, and you have to mentally deconstruct what you've read, and it gives you more of a personal experience and insight into what you're looking at. And I believe that that is the key to closing the gap between worlds, stereotypes, hate, and the book is really relevant right now, and it leads to a conversation that everyone should have.
Love that it has a strong young female protagonist who has to make decisions about what she feels is right. It's a painful situation that she finds herself in, but she works her way through it with the love of her family and the support of friends. She has a struggle with who she is on, her outside life and her inner life, and she has to go through those daily struggles, which I think really resonates with teens.
I thought the language was so real, not coming from the kind of background that Starr came from, or that Angie Thomas came from for that matter. I was able to get a window onto a part of American society and a community in which I normally would not be a part of. In fact, I'm not a part of. And it helped me through the language, through the interaction of different characters in the novel. It gave me an ability to understand some of the issues that you would normally see only on television, but that became real through the novel and the characters in the novel.
The best way to be like Starr is to not be afraid to use their voices, to speak up and speak out, and know that they can be light in the darkness. That's all it takes, is for us to be that light in the darkness. And the thing is, if you look at a night sky and you see one or two stars, sometimes it can feel like, oh, that's not a lot of light. But if you started, just imagine if you saw a lot of them in the sky, how bright the sky would be, even in the darkness. So think about that. That's why Starr was named Starr, because her dad said she was his light in the darkness. If we are all light in the darkness, we have no choice but to shine. Sometimes it feels like the worst voices are the loudest voices, but we can drown them out. We have to keep going. We have to fight for what we believe is right. And we can no longer even afford to be silent, because these days silence is consent. So we have to speak up, we have to speak out, and we have to also remind ourselves that this is a sprint, not a marathon. A marathon, not a sprint. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So it may seem like it's hopeless right now, but it is totally hopeful, because in order to change the world, we just have to start changing the world right around us.
So what I loved the most about this book is that everybody that I've talked to that has read it or even seen the movie, which was amazing, it starts conversations, and you're able to see other perspectives and kind of learn more about other people and the world and just society in general. So that was my favorite part about it.
This one is just like brings you alive. The style and characterization is so much more vivid and almost to the point. I'm thinking it's so entertaining. It doesn't feel like it's a novel. It feels more like fun, something you're enjoying just emotions of the characters and the flavor of the people that I usually don't meet, and who live in different lifestyle, and the way they talk and the way they relate to each other.
I was taken aback at how emotional this book made me, and I don't know if it was a combination of her being so young and obviously the circumstances of the story, but it really, really hit me. Like, I was crying a lot, and I was like, this is just awful, and I think it just compounded into being very effective emotionally on me. And I really liked how it wove in the different worlds that she had to live within, and the different constraints and demands that those put on her in different ways. And it was very interesting to me to think about, because I didn't have that experience ever. So it's interesting to think about that aspect of having to put that on top of this already horrible situation. It was just really impactful. I thought it was really well done.
the best thing that books did for me was that it showed me that there was more to the world than my neighborhood, than my city, than my state, and even my country, and even this planet. There's so much out there to explore, and there's so much out there to discover. And if nothing else, books help unlock your imagination even more so that you know things are possible. So it's important to read. It's important to cultivate a love for reading. It's important to get caught up in books. It's important to unlock that part of your brain and let your imagination go wild. So I think books are one of the best ways to do that. If you can't afford to travel, if your mom and dad can't take you around the world, you can get a book and you can suddenly see the world.
Just, you can almost see like a heart cry that she's just pouring out on those pages, and just how with the movie those words now have life. And so just seeing the passion behind her writing, and just how she's able to translate that through now, of course, the movie has been amazing.
It's just the way she writes and the way that she's able to represent these characters in a way that they can relate to everybody. And you can find like pieces of yourself or pieces of your own experiences in all of the characters, even if you don't have like direct connection with certain situations. And so I think that's what's most inspiring, is that she has just been able to, she just knows her audience and she knows how to represent what she's trying to do.
I've heard that she wrote the book as a young woman, and she is has really written a book that just, again, speaks to teenagers and also comes from her own personal experience. And I think that I'm a librarian, and in that world right now, we're really looking for authors who are writing from their own experience and in their own words. There's a whole movement around the Own Voices movement, where authors are writing from their own background, and that's very important in the educational world.
I love the subject matter of the book, because not a lot of people want to step out and talk about things like that. So I think for her to do that, and of course it's very timely now in the place that the state that our country is in.
I feel like she just has reached a group of young people that most authors have not yet been able to reach, especially in our current climate. And all of the political aspects that she has in her books are very current and very close to home when it comes to a reader like myself.
Yeah, one of my biggest inspirations right now, it's hard to call it a singular person, but I am so inspired by the authors in children's literature right now. I'm so inspired by my peers. I'm inspired by Jason Reynolds. I'm inspired by Nick Stone. I'm inspired by Becky Albertalli. I'm inspired by Adam Silvera. I'm inspired by all of these different authors who are not only doing amazing work, but they're fighting to make sure that young people get books that either show them themselves or show them people unlike themselves. And so they are my biggest inspiration these days, knowing that I'm not in this fight alone, knowing that there are super talented people who are doing it as well, and knowing that so many young people have an opportunity to pick up a book that they will fall in love with because of the work that my peers are doing. It's the best feeling ever. So I'm so inspired by other authors. I'm so inspired by the work that's being done, both on the page and within this industry.
Her continued humility in the face of everything that she has accomplished will never cease to inspire me. Yeah, she's a real winner.
She's just an inspiration, period. And even as a little kid, though, this girl talks sometimes like an old lady. Some of the things she used to even say to me that kind of sparked something in me to encourage me. And that's odd, I know, from like a 3 or 4-year-old saying something. And even with reading books, if I read a book to her at night, we always read, particularly at bedtime. And I'd read her a story, and if she didn't like how it ended, then she'd tell what she wanted it to be like. Okay, so she got so good, she started telling her own stories. And it came to a point for a good long while there, she was telling me stories, and she would just tell the story and make up stuff and tell it how she wanted it to be.